Opinions on the new iPhone 11 Pro here and the Pro Max, of course, seem to vary wildly across the internet so far, from boring upgrade, no innovations, to most amazing iPhone ever, and as ever, the truth lies somewhere in between. Whilst it's true there's little here that's new in the industry, what Apple has worked on have been the things users have been asking for most, namely a dramatically better camera system and dramatically better battery life. Much has been made of the tick-tock cycle at Apple, with a major release, tick, and then often a polish of that same design for the following year, tock. Most reviewers have rated the iPhone 11 Pro as, unexpectedly, another tock following the iPhone X tick and iPhone XS tock keep up at the back. But I disagree. It's true that the basics, the screen, the design boast only iterative improvements, but the single biggest features prized by users in 2019 in any phone, regardless of price point, camera, image quality and battery life, and both of these take a big step up in the iPhone 11 Pro. So yes, it's an absolute tick from me. Apple has been improving the iPhone, obviously, since the launch in 2007, gradually building in and refining features and technology pioneered on other handsets in the Symbian, Windows and then Android worlds, including AMOLED screens, Qi charging, high-end cameras, stereo speakers, all while keeping the best of Apple's own ideas on the hardware front, not least the payment-grade Face ID system and the pioneering Bionic processor series. We're talking heft here, but in a good way. This stainless steel chassis feels as if it means business, yet the 188-gram weight isn't unmanageable. The 5.8-inch display at 1125 by 2436 pixels is the same as on previous iPhones to my eyes, despite a new tech label, Super Retina XDR. It's made by Samsung. It's right up there with the best displays in the phone world, Samsung's own, for its flagships in the Android world, of course. Things are all new on the back. I love the new grippier, less fingerprint-prone matte finish on the glass, even if most Pro users do opt to keep their £1,200 plus phones in a case 24/7. Shown here, of course, is the all-new midnight green colour. It looks as if it means business, and it's as cool as the tech inside. Added now to the camera is an ultra-wide lens, of course, but this doesn't tell the whole story. A bigger deal for day-to-day photos is the improved Smart HDR system, now with semantic rendering. The Smart HDR already takes a batch of photos and merges them together to provide cleaner output with higher dynamic range, but this is now enhanced with intelligent recognition of different scene elements, so sky, faces, shrubs, buildings, flowers, and so on, each of which is subtly enhanced, piecemeal, independently in appropriate ways. Similar AI scene recognition systems on many competing Android phones are often clumsier, I found, with Google's HDR Plus Pixel camera being perhaps the best comparison here. I've shot everything you've seen here in 4:3 as a default, but note that you can now shoot in 16:9 or square aspect ratios if you prefer. This option is apparently an iPhone 11 exclusive, at least for the moment, oddly. The camera UI has been tweaked for the iPhone 11 series to optionally show part of the scope of the ultra-wide-angle shot behind translucent controls when you're actually intending to use the main lens, which is a cool way to get more from a UI that defaults to 4:3 captures. With memories of my beloved Lumia 1020 and its reframe feature, 2013, anyone remember that? Having taken a standard shot here on the iPhone 11 Pro, if you accidentally chop something out of the frame and wish after the fact that you've taken a wider angle photo, you can multi-touch out inside the Photos Edit cropping UI, and magically, information from a behind-the-scenes wide-angle shot is spliced in around your main shot. When this works and saves the day, you'll punch your air in triumph. It's important to note, by the way, another innovation here. Apple syncs data from all three cameras so that they all focus identically in real time with the same white balance applied. In practice, this means that you can zoom in and out and you hardly notice differences in subject handling as the phone switches cameras. This is especially impressive when shooting video. So test video here, iPhone 11 Pro. You can obviously step out wide angle and 2 times optically zoomed while filming. There's also, if you flick out on the zoom buttons, you can do smooth zooming between the cameras with next to no, that's really smooth in the viewfinder, because the cameras are linked. You can just go from one to the other, to the other, to the other, with no difference in colour balance. That's really quite impressive. Let go of the zoom wheel and then you're back to the buttons if you want. As you saw in the photo examples, Apple now has a true night mode, i.e. taking multiple shots while handheld and low light to composite a mocked up long exposure, working more or less as it has on competing Android phones for the last few years. Mind you, night mode here comes on automatically when needed rather than a user having to manually stop, think and activate a special mode, which is nice. There's a subtle indicator in the UI with a bottom left control that turns yellow from white in low light to indicate that night mode is possibly going to be employed. It's a bit of a gamble as to whether this is actually going to happen though. You have to kind of trust Apple, mash the shutter button and hope. It usually just works though. I won't go over iOS 13 itself since it's available on all recent iPhones and you've almost certainly seen or played with it. But the system-wide optional dark mode is a huge step forward for Apple, again mimicking other OS from the past, in getting good power savings from its AMOLED screens. It also looks uniformly gorgeous, especially out and about at night where your eyes are saved from blinding white that ruins your human night sight. Dark mode can be set manually or it can be set to turn on automatically at sunset with controls and toggles available in the Settings app and also in Control Center. Photos also got a complete overhaul for iOS 13 with a new tab that curates your library and shows your selection of highlights organised by time, plus a new photo editing interface with more powerful tweaking tools. And you can also now edit video in photos directly with at least the basics, cropping, straightening, applying filters, adjusting colour and so on. Media playback is something that we all enjoy on phones, with Apple rolling up support for Dolby 5.1, 7.1 and Atmos sound into the generic term spatial audio, which is fair enough. General consumers only need to know that the speakers in their phone support all the different audio codecs and optimizations that they'll come across from various online content. Given that the sound comes from an earpiece speaker and a port on the bottom of the phone, the illusion of balanced front-facing speakers is quite impressive. Full volume. The sound is pretty loud and there's even some bass. Maybe not the absolute best speakers of the phone world, but certainly pretty good. When Apple introduced the idea of the pressure sensing 3D touch for the iPhone 6S range in 2015, I was very skeptical publicly. A new UI paradigm that added 20 grams per phone in new hardware that people needed to learn, that was unintuitive in a feather touch capacitive world, and so on. 4 years later, Apple has essentially admitted that few people ever use 3D touch and that it was a tech blind alley, reverting to what the rest of the industry has been doing for a decade, i.e. holding a touch point for context-sensitive actions and options with no pressure needed. Apple calls this haptic touch and ties in the recognition of long presses with its Taptic engine for mechanical feedback. The coolest feature of 3D touch, in my view, had been to press in on the keyboard to get direct cursor control, but this has been mimicked by a long press on the spacebar. Not quite as convenient, but hey, it's still there and it works just fine. The biggest bonus for Apple is they get to ditch the pressure sensing layers in the display and save weight that they could use for, well, extra battery. Talking of which, how long a phone lasts on a battery charge is a mix of many factors, not least the screen brightness, the signal strength, the applications run. However, like for like, Apple claimed the 11 Pro will run for 4 hours more per charge than the XS before it. This is made possible by, one, a bigger battery, around 400 milliamp hours larger at 3046 milliamp hours, i.e. an extra 15%, a more power efficient display, the new dark mode for AMOLED, and a more power efficient processor. Put the four factors together and I estimate up to 10 hours screen on time per charge if you're careful, enough to get through the absolute heaviest and longest day, or more likely to be able to last through the next day if you forget to charge overnight. The iPhone 11 Pro Max, which I don't have to hand at the moment, includes almost a 4,000 mAh battery, up from 3174, so 25% more, and reviewers are seeing the same gains across the board as for this smaller model. And when it's time to charge, Apple has also taken a big step, for Apple at least, with the inclusion of this rather nice 3 amp charger, 15 watts, so 3 times faster than that shipped with every other iPhone before it, though admittedly a shadow of what started to be shipped in the Android world in 2019. Still, interestingly, I've checked, this also outputs 2 amp at 9 volt, i.e. 18 watts, perhaps we're doing double duty for iPads and MacBooks. And curiously, the mains adapter outputs through a USB Type-C connector. Again, think about iPads, MacBooks, with a Type-C to Lightning lead in the box. It's almost now a certainty that the 2020 iPhone 12 Pro or whatever they call it, will have Type-C on the phone. Then Apple's products will charge harmoniously again. In terms of storage, there are two ways to look at what Apple is offering for the iPhone 11 Pro. Firstly, to even offer it with 64GB, in fact, you only get 50GB free out of the box, in the first place is a bit crazy since 4K 60 frames a second videos eat up storage at half a gigabyte per minute of footage. Ouch. So the 256GB variant is then effectively the starting point for the iPhone 11 Pro, so factor in £1,200 in the UK at least. On the other hand, I'll defend Apple's decision to start at low capacity. I know many iPhone users who live quite happily with 64GB for their entire ownership of the phone. Media is more or less all streamed, they rarely shoot 4K video, and even with the extra data needed occasionally for iPhone 11 extended frame photos, they won't get close to running out of room. So you pay as your money, you take your choice. With so much positive so far, I also have to share a couple of frustrations with the iPhone 11 range. Now, we've had AMOLED screens for several generations of iPhone now, and there's one trick that AMOLED enables, always on display, with the screen just lighting up the pixels needed. I owned this Nokia N86 smartphone 10 years ago, 2009. It's got an always on display, time and date. And almost everything in the Android world, over about £300 with an AMOLED display, ever since has had always on. Yet there's nothing equivalent in the iPhone world. You still need to physically lift the phone to see the time and date and notification icons. It's frustrating in 2019. I do get that there's a battery hit, but it's slight on most phones, a few percent a day, and should at very least be something a user could turn on in settings. Secondly, with the new iPad Pros now offering USB Type-C and thus 100% compatibility with standard USB discs, it's a shame we're not quite there yet in the iPhone Pro world. As it stands now, you're limited to low-power older USB discs plugged in by a separately sourced Lightning to SD or USB lead in order for iOS 13 to see external files and allow them to be opened. Phew. Almost every 2019 phone in the wider world over $100 is now USB Type-C, but it seems that it'll be 2020 before Apple switches over from Lightning to USB Type-C for their own handsets for the iPhone 12 Pro. However, the iPhone 11 Pro is without a shadow of a doubt the best iPhone I've ever tested. As an iPhone with insane build quality and battery life, it wins. As the highest performing stills and video camera phone in the world, bar none, at the moment, it wins. If you love, or at least can live with, iOS as an operating system and interface, then this is the phone to save up for or to give yourself for a Christmas present.